Hello, welcome to this video, which I hope is part 8 of the Hi-Fi 101 series, if I'm counting correctly. It's all about tweaking your system. And it's going to be a bit anecdotal, but hopefully, if you bear with me, you will see perhaps where I've barked up the wrong tree in terms of making tiny little tweaks to improve the system, because the system will never be the same as in the demo shop, because you've got a different room to them for a start, and that is one of the biggest influences on the sound of a system. So while it might show broadly the same characteristics, it will never be exactly the same, and as you listen to the stuff and live with it, you will possibly find areas of strengths and weaknesses within a system and try and sort of minimise those weaknesses. Mine has always been an uneven bass and some treble aggression. I started out with Ruark Epilogue speakers, which are little stand mount things on metallic stands, which I've still got on the telly. A Riga Luna amp, which I've still got on the telly. That's quite a brash amp, but it's well controlled, so it shouldn't have been so aggressive. But we'll come back to that in a minute. I also had a Riga Planet CD player, which at the time was one of the most analog sounding CD players, especially under £1,000. In fact, it was about £400, and it was a really good purchase. And I sold it a couple of years ago, and someone's got a really good CD player now. And I also had a Goldwing Lenco GL75. Now, playing the records on the Goldwing Lenco, I was made more aware of the aggression in the rest of the system. Now, linking all that up, I had a Chord Chrysalis CD to amp cable, which I've still got. The record player is linked by its own built-in interconnect, which there's not really an awful lot you can do about. I had named NACA 5 speaker cable, and the NACA 5, I felt, although it was quite expensive, it was quite a lively cable, which was brilliant for short, bursts of listening, but for longer periods, as I found out, it's not really, my cup of tea. When I got the R3 speakers, by which time other parts of the system had changed, in particular the record player had changed to a Riga R3, Riga P3, sorry. But when I got that, because I couldn't buy wire anymore, I got some very cheap Pure Sonic cable, which was like heaven in comparison. In fact, it was absolute bargain basement stuff. And there was nothing wrong with it. I'd moved house, not to this house, but I'd moved house to a different house, had fairly large music room, it sounded great, it sounded wonderful. When I got the whole lot here, by which time the Planet had been changed for an Apollo, and the P3 obviously became the P5, which you can see in my videos, I noticed that although there was still this, what was basically non-aggressive, the sound was not quite so involving as before, and the uneven bass had come back, and a certain amount of raucousness in the treble, especially with the loudness ward CDs. When I went to change my cartridge a few months ago, I spoke to the guy about it, and he mentioned all about moving your speakers away from the wall, which helped a bit, making sure that the bass drivers, which are on the side of the R3s, point inwards, because that way they don't sort of bounce against the side walls of the room, which could reinforce the bass. And really, I mean, last week when I went to see the Isis and Osiris, I spoke to him further about it, and he said, well, actually, you've got all the right stuff, but so really, we use NACA 5, he said. Right, well, I said, well, I don't like NACA 5, I've had it before and I don't like it. So eventually, after having this wonderful experience listening to this £12,000 hi-fi system through speakers which were comparable to mine, roughly speaking, he said that that they had a company called Cord, which are a very good company, and they make bargain basement speaker cable, and very expensive speaker cable, and also sell interconnects and things, and it's very neutral stuff. So he sold me their cheapest speaker cable, which was a lot cheaper than the main NACA 5, tiny bit more expensive than the Pure Sonic stuff that I'd had before, yeah, it's taken the edge off the bass ever so slightly and opened out the treble. And what that means is that you can dance to it. People think that you need oodles of bass to dance to things. Witness the Ford Fiesta with the fluffy dice in, that's usually parked somewhere on Southend seafront, that is shaking away. And you think, well, how on earth can anyone stand to listen to that? And given that they want to dance to this music, take the bass away. Not completely, obviously, but, just reduce it enough, because what you then start to hear, and I'll give you a real-world illustration of this, the Sound of Drums song, which I demoed last week, I'd always thought that in the chorus you had long, sustained bass notes that were sort of a boom, like that, but in tune. Turns out that they actually were going boom, 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 as in quaver eighth beats. Now I can actually genuinely hear that on my system. You can hear how they would modulate the strings and to bend the bass drums, whilst they don't have quite so much thwack, especially with records now, they really dance. I mean, unfortunately, I found a couple of Erasure LPs the other week, and listening to them, you just want to hop around the room. It's just unbelievable. You don't want to sit down ever now when you listen to my system. It's still not quite as controlled, and in terms of stereo positioning and stuff like that, it's just nowhere near the level of the Isis and Osiris. But now it's a tiny bit closer, and they always say that the weakest part of the system will dictate what your hi-fi system sounds like. It's only as good as the weakest part of your system. It's not always easy to find that weakest part of your system, but looking at your cables is sometimes a fairly cheap way to start. But you need to do your homework here and look at some of the hi-fi magazines. Hi-Fi Choice in particular has quite a good section in the back that will describe the characteristics of various different interconnects and cables, and have a look there. And then because this is something that you're not really going to be able to demo too well in a hi-fi shop, but it's worth trying out, especially if you don't end up spending too much money on it. That was a very worthwhile upgrade that really has, for the moment anyway, transformed my system. Only slightly, but it's a good transformation nonetheless. So I hope that helps, and see you next time. Bye.